Hello everyone, I'm going to do a talk now entitled The Hero in Us All. And it's nice to trying to find that hero within each one of us because it's there, particularly in times like this when things are so difficult, trying to find out who we really are behind all the masks, the real person. So I hope you like the background. It's much nicer than where I'm actually sitting at the moment. And I hope that we can share a few things today. Hoping to do a couple of talks over the next couple of days. I've got one called Theosophical Masters, Buddha and Buddhism, which I was going to do tonight, but I decided to do this one at the last minute. So I'll probably do that one tomorrow, hopefully. So let's just breathe out any tension and let's be nice and relaxed. Yeah, it's lovely to be relaxed and be at peace and just feel the unborn Buddha mind within, awakening us to everything that's good and true and beautiful. Just breathe out and be at peace. Right, this is going to be a PowerPoint presentation. I'll have to find out how to get rid of all that. And there we are. The hero in us all. There's a nice picture, and that is actually by Arthur Hughes, and it's Sir Galahad on the quest of the Holy Grail. One of my favourite pictures, my favourite paintings. So the hero in us all, and there is a hero in us all, even though we may not think sometimes, there definitely is. Pythagoras stated in the golden verses of Pythagoras, first worship the immortal gods as they are established and ordained by the law, reverence the oath, and next the heroes full of goodness and light, and honour likewise the terrestrial demons by rendering them the worship lawfully due to them. Now, H.P. Blavatsky writes in an article entitled Genius, were chapters 2 and 3 of 1 Corinthians ever translated in the spirit in which they were written, even the dead letter is now disfigured, the world might receive strange revelations. Among other things, it would have a key to many hitherto unexplained rites of ancient paganism, one of which is the mystery of this same hero worship. And it would learn that if the streets of the city that honoured one such man were strewn with roses for the passage of the hero of the day, if every citizen was called to bow in reverence to him who was so feasted, and if both priest and poet vied in their zeal to immortalize the hero's name after his death, occult philosophy tells us the reason why this was done. Behold, it saith, in every manifestation of genius, when combined with virtue, in the warrior or the bard, the great painter, artist, statesman, or man of science, who soars high above the heads of the vulgar herd, the undeniable presence of the celestial exile, the divine ego, whose jailer thou art, O man of matter. Thus that which we call deification applied to the immortal God within, not to the dead walls of the human tabernacle that contained him. And this was done in tacit and silent recognition of the efforts made by the divine captive who, under the most adverse circumstances of incarnation, still succeeded in manifesting himself, or herself, of course. So the hero in us all is our divine ego, or our mind illumined by our intuition through the universal spirit. In Theosophy, we call the divine ego Buddhimanas. Nowadays, the word hero is used very loosely. Football players are regarded as heroes, celebrities and pop stars. This, of course, is very much referring to the dead walls of the human tabernacle. This is not to put down the efforts of some athletes, such as those with disabilities, who compete at the Paralympics. It is to their credit that they overcome their disabilities and prove themselves to be capable of great things physically and mentally. But generally, the willpower gained is on a physical and lower mental level. Nowadays, children are taught to develop just these lower aspects of their being generally. This creates a competitive spirit which is lauded in modern society, but actually breeds jealousy and pride and a division between failures and successes, which on a wider scale can lead to conflicts even between countries and maybe even between planets in the future if we don't change our ways. Of course, this is not to put down the efforts of a lot of educational systems that are trying to do things a lot differently now in a more spiritually orientated way. So Corinthians 2 verse 13 states, "This is what we speak, not in words taught us by human wisdom, but in words taught by the Spirit, explaining spiritual realities with Spirit-taught words." That's very profound. In other words, we have to come to understand by the use of our spiritual intuitions. The two chapters that H.P. Blavatsky refers to in the quotes I used at the beginning are about developing these intuitions rather than reliance upon the dead letter. HPB has also stated many times that St. Paul, who was said to be the author of these letters to the Corinthians, was an initiate into the mysteries. So a true hero is one who is able to conquer all their lower passions and desires and live in the light of their spiritual nature. The quote by HPB also mentions that the manifestation of genius must be combined with virtue. And yet when we look at the lives of genius poets, musicians and painters, very few of them could be regarded as virtuous in the accepted sense of the word. I think this may be because when they are producing great works of art, their being rises to another level. They are infused with spirit and different in their ordinary day-to-day lives. Also, if it were not for this suffering and struggles physically, mentally and morally, they would not be able to produce the unique works that they do, stamped with the impress of all their life experiences. Otherwise, what they produced would be rather bland and lifeless. And this could be said to be the divine captive who, under the most adverse circumstances of incarnation, still succeeds in manifesting himself. On a higher level, there are great sages who produce spiritual writings. It is to these that virtue is usually the quality needed to produce works on this much higher level of being. And there is Vasishtha, author of the Yoga Vasishtha, seen here giving instruction to Rama, one of the great incarnations. So the Irish theosophical writer known as A.E. or George William Russell wrote, "It is true that men have done wrong, hence their pain. But back of all this, there is something infinitely soothing, a light which does not wound, which says no harsh thing, even although the darkest of spirits turns to it in its agony. For the darkest of human spirits are still around him this first glory, which shines from a deeper being within, whose history may be told as the legend of the hero in man. What we need is that this interior tenderness shall be elevated into seership, that what in most is only yearning or blind love shall see clearly its way and its hope. To this end, we have to observe more intently the nature of the interior life. We find indeed that it is not a solitude at all, but dense and multitudinous being. Dense with multitudinous being. Instead of being alone, we are in thronged highways of existence. For our guidance, when entering here, many words of warning have been uttered, laws have been outlined, and beings full of wonder, terror, and beauty described. Yet there is a spirit in us deeper than our intellectual being, which I think of as the hero in man, who feels the nobility of its place in the midst of all this, and who would fain equal the greatness of perception with deeds as great. Beautiful words. Yet there is a spirit in us deeper than our intellectual being, which I think of as the hero in man, who feels the nobility of its place in the midst of all this, and who would fain equal the greatness of perception with deeds as great. So, as said in theosophical literature regarding meditation, we have this inexpressible yearning of the inner man to go out towards the infinite. In our moments of seeming solitude, we are in fact more in the presence of beings on higher planes than when we're in company with others and our mind distracted by things on a lower plane. So we are more in company when alone than with friends or family, in one sense. Although, of course, we have to be in a meditative state of mind, and even then we may not be aware of other presences, except perhaps deep within our minds, which may manifest in a feeling of peace and contentment. We are in fact in tune with our highest self, which automatically puts us in contact with others in the same state, which is a true community of souls. And that happens on all levels, even the lowest. There is in us this hero in the true sense of the word, that like all the legendary heroes of myth and legend, overcomes all obstacles and trials. Most of us are unaware of our potential as spiritual beings because of our conditioning by materialistic society. There's a picture of Theseus and Ariadne. As you know, Theseus went into the labyrinth and defeated the Minotaur, which could represent our lower nature. He was given the thread to make his escape by Ariadne. Which could be the soul that leads us and guides us onwards. Spiritual part of our being that leads us out of the labyrinth of words and images. But we have this potential to overcome these trials because our spiritual eternal self is untouched by whatever befalls our erring personality. We identify with the passing shadow rather than the ever-shining sun. As I say in most of my talks nowadays, we need to take the stance of the spiritual being. It is who or what we are in reality. We are not the personal self with all its mental, moral, and physical sufferings. We are that being that never suffers. The Bhagavad Gita states, just as a man casts off worn-out clothes and puts on new ones, so also the embodied self casts off worn-out bodies and enters others that are new. Weapons cut it not, fire burns it not, water wets it not, wind dries it not. The self cannot be cut, burnt, wetted, or dried up. It is eternal, all-pervading, stable, ancient, and immovable. That's a very, very important fact to remember, when we're going through life. The real part of us, the divine part of us, cannot be touched by anything. Everything that happens just happens to the lower part of us, our personality, our personal self. Nothing happens to our divine self. So this is what we are. If we can really see and feel and experience what we truly are, then we can act in an heroic way. Because as spiritual beings, we are invincible. Of course, this does not encourage acting rashly or foolishly. During our many incarnations, we wear so many different masks, like the actors in ancient Greece. But the permanent dimension to our being, the reincarnating ego, does not change. So the tales we read about various heroes in different cultures may be regarded as symbolic of the spiritual journey that we all embark upon in time and eventually out of time, I suppose. In the Sleeping Beauty stories, the prince, who can be said to represent the questing mind, battles through dangers, including brambles that he must cut through, that may represent the entanglements that threaten to engulf our minds, and finds the princess, who represents the spiritual nature, Atma Buddhi, which is dormant or sleeping in us, until she receives the kiss and awakens. Then the two are united in love. The mind becomes Taijasa, which means illumined by this divine spirit, this awakened divinity. Of course, people nowadays put strange interpretations upon that. Like recently, someone was saying that he shouldn't have kissed the princess without her permission, forgetting that the reason he kissed the princess was to awaken. Even in the story, the reason he kissed the princess was to awaken her from a coma. So would he have been rather cruel just to have left her in the coma for eternity? But on a deeper level, of course, it represents this awakening of the divinity within us by the kiss, by receiving the holy kiss, the divine kiss. Many other tales, like the quest for the Holy Grail. Just got one more picture there of the Sleeping Beauty. That's more of a cartoon version. So many other tales, like the quest for the Holy Grail and many others, or the Golden Fleece, which we enjoy reading because of the triumph of the hero at the end, resonate with our own individual quests. In our life, we come up against many problems. For some people, these are very serious. For others, less so, according to our karma and stage of development. But we have this inner power to overcome all of these if we are at least somewhat awakened to our true nature, and if we are fixed resolutely on the spiritual journey. I think the archetypal images react upon our consciousness, and the success at the end fires our inspiration and gives us the encouragement to go on through everything. So they are more than just stories to entertain. As we read the story or watch the film, we feel that rush of excitement and satisfaction at the final outcome. That's why modern obsession with anti-heroes, who are as bad as the villains and sometimes even worse, and with grisly murders and serial killers, is a symptom of the material nature of society, and is the work of forces trying to undermine the spiritual progress of humanity. I know H.P. Blavatsky wrote an article in which he said that people who are obsessed with grisly murders and things like that actually can radiate very negative influences and even develop the evil eye, so that whoever they look upon can be harmed by that evil eye, just because they're absorbing all the time these grisly details and facts. And yet TV and books and novels are just nowadays full of grisly murders and such like. So true heroism requires the cultivation of genius in the true sense of the word. Nowadays it is used loosely. Someone who's good at maths or has a good memory is regarded as a genius. But HPB says in the article I mentioned earlier on genius, quoted from earlier, she says, "Great genius, therefore, if true and innate, and not merely an abnormal expansion of our human intellect, can never copy or condescend to imitate, but will ever be original, sui generis, in its creative impulses and realizations. Like those gigantic Indian lilies that shoot out from the clefts and fissures of the cloud nursing and bare rocks on the highest plateau of the Nilgiri hills, True genius needs but an opportunity to spring forth into existence and blossom in the sight of all in the most arid soil, for its stamp is always unmistakable. To use a popular saying, innate genius, like murder, will out sooner or later, and the more it will have been suppressed and hidden, the greater will be the flood of light thrown by the sudden eruption. On the other hand, artificial genius, so often confused with the former, and which in truth is but the outcome of long studies and training, will never be more than, so to say, the flame of a lamp burning outside the portal of the fane. It may throw a long trail of light across the road, but it leaves the inside of the building in darkness. And as every faculty and property in nature is dual, each may be made to serve two ends, evil as well as good. So will artificial genius betray itself, born out of the chaos of terrestrial sensations of perceptive and retentive faculties, yet of finite memory. It will ever remain the slave of its body, and that body, owing to its unreliability and the natural tendency of matter to confusion, will not fail to leave even the greatest genius, so called, back into its own primordial element, which is chaos again, or evil, or earth. Thus, between the true and the artificial genius, one born from the light of the immortal ego, the other from the evanescent will-o'-the-wisp of the terrestrial or purely human intellect and the animal soul, there is a chasm to be spanned only by him who aspires ever onward, who never loses sight, even when in the depths of matter, of that guiding star of the divine soul and mind, or what we call Buddhi Manas. The latter does not require, as does the former, cultivation. End of quote. So in society, we cultivate the lower aspects of our mind and regard those who have the best memories as being the most intelligent. But the real heroes are those who, despite the pressures of a materialistic society, carry on regardless. This is done most effectively in the midst of society, rather than retiring to a cave or living apart from other people. Although there are people who do live in caves whose minds are turned totally towards helping humanity, and others who live in the midst of society who are totally who have no interest in helping society. But that's a generalization. This is a generalization. This is because we face our challenges and fight our dragons and help others within society. And this is our odyssey. Now, the writer called Clifford Bax, who I think wrote poetry as well. He looks very dapper there, doesn't he? Yes, a true gentleman. And he writes, "We who live in the great cities could not altogether avoid, even if we would, a certain association with the interests of our time. Wherever we go, the minds of men are feverishly debating some new political measure or some new scheme for the reconstruction of society. Now, as in olden times, the rumours of an impending war will engulf the subtler interests of men, and unless we are willing to forego all intercourse, we find ourselves involved in 100 sympathies. A friendly group will gather one evening and open their thoughts concerning the experiences of the soul. They will often declare that only these matter, and these matters are of profound interest. And yet on the morrow, the most of them regard the enthusiasms of the mind as far away, unpractical, not of immediate account. But even at noon, the stars are above us, and because a man in material difficulties cannot evoke the highest experiences that he has known, they've not become the less real. They pertain to his immortal nature, and if in the circumstances of life he loses memory of them, it is because he is likewise mortal. In the measure that we develop our interior selves, philosophy becomes the most permanent of our interests, and it may well be that the whole aim of man is to acquire an unbroken and ever broadening realization of the Supreme Spirit, so that in a far off day he may become the master of all imaginable conditions. He therefore, who brings us back to our central selves and shows us that However far we may wander, it is these high thoughts which are truly the most real. He is, of all men, our greatest benefactor. Now, those who thus care for the spiritual aspects of life are of two kinds, the intellectual and the imaginative. There are men of keen intellect who comprehend some philosophic system, who will defend it with elaborate reasonings and proclaim themselves its adherents. Put the earth at their feet, the stars in the firmament, man himself and their own souls have undergone no transfiguration. Their philosophies are lifeless, for imagination is to the intellect what breath is to the body. Thoughts that never glow with imagination, that are never applied to all that the sense perceives or the mind remembers, thoughts that remain quite abstract as empty husks of no value. End of quote. Now, HBB stressed the importance of the creative imagination along with the development of the spiritual will. If we awaken to the fact that inwardly we are immortal beings, then we can act with confidence amid the many trials on our quest to find our own holy grail. In The Light on the Path by Mabel Collins, it says, "Stand aside in the coming battle, and though thou fightest, be not thou the warrior. Look for the warrior and let him fight in thee. Take his orders for battle and obey them. Obey him not as though he were a general, but as though he were thyself, and his spoken words were the utterance of thy secret desires. For he is thyself, yet infinitely wiser and stronger than thyself. Look for him, else in the fever and hurry of the fight thou mayest pass him, and he will not know thee unless thou knowest him. If thy cry meets his listening ear, then will he fight in thee and fill the dull void within. And if this is so, then canst thou go through the fight cool and unwearied, standing aside and letting him battle for thee. Then it will be impossible for thee to strike one blow amiss. But if thou look not for him, if thou pass him by, then there is no safeguard for thee. Thy brain will reel, thy heart grow uncertain, and in the dust of the battlefield thy sight and senses will fail, and thou wilt not know thy friends from thy enemies. He is thyself, yet thou art but finite and liable to error. He is eternal and is sure. He is eternal truth. When once he has entered thee and become thy warrior, he will never utterly desert thee, and at the day of the great peace, he will become one with thee." End of quote. So this is the awakening of the higher self. Now, Bankei, who I like a lot, I recently did an article in Hermes magazine about Bankei and the unborn Buddha mind. He says, he was a Zen master, he always said that the unborn Buddha mind smoothly manages everything. So when you're listening to a lecture and someone passes by outside without consciously thinking, you know whether it's a man or a woman or a child. Or if a car passes by, you know it's a car without having to think that. This is an example of the unborn Buddha mind or the higher self working, he says. And if we trust in this on all levels, it will guide us through life's trials, and it will be impossible to fail. I'm currently rereading my book on Bankei, and what he says makes incredible sense. Just be what we are. He says, don't try to become a Buddha, just try to remain a Buddha, which is the same as it says in The Voice of the Silence by H.P. Blavatsky, where it says, look inward, thou art Buddha. Not look inward, thou wilt be Buddha. Look inward, thou art Buddha, which is a very, very important word. The word art is very important. Now, I remember when I was very young, every Saturday, my friend and I would make our way to the town centre and certain newsagents and browse through all the superhero comics. Superman, Batman, Flash, Green Lantern, Green Arrow, Wonder Woman. And there they all are. I think the end's Aquaman, I think. And then Green Lantern, Wonder Woman, Superman, Batman, Flash. Not sure who the last one is. So it was the highlight of our week and a sort of pilgrimage. And some Christmases I would buy an album, or my parents would buy me an album, which was a hardcover extra large comic book that came out once a year. At that time, it was the most special thing to me. In those days, I wanted to grow up to be a superhero myself and help to fight evil and help those in trouble. Me and my friends would run about with towels tucked down our collars at the back for capes, promising to save the world. But when I turned 40, I decided it had to stop. It really had to. I was getting strange looks off people. I still do, but that's for different reasons. I believe those days are one of the reasons I decided to take the spiritual path. It's only recently I came to that conclusion that it was that ideal that entered my mind at those early days of my life. I realised I couldn't have these superpowers, but I could at least do my humble bit to help the forces of good. So we must never underestimate the power of the imagery in such books and films and TV series. There's my favourite at the moment, Supergirl. It's nice to see that it's gone more over to the feminine as well, the goddess, the more feminine side. And these archetypal heroes, whether in comic books, mythology, or literature, express a feeling inside us all, for a time of peace, when love will rule our hearts and kindness will be uppermost. The cynical will see them just as imaginary characters that have no bearing on our lives. But the intuitive will see through the mists that often befog our minds and hear the heart cry of a world steeped in pain and suffering, and the hero in us all answering that cry with a promise of better days to come, if only we realise what power for good lies within each one of us. That's the greatest superpower of all. So there is a superhero inside all of us. We just need the courage to put on the cape. The symbolic cape, if not the real cape. It is interesting to note that in Hinduism, there are certain siddhis or spiritual powers gained by one who practices Raja Yoga, meditation, etc. The voice of the silence states that these are the higher and lower siddhis, the lower ones being merely psychic powers that can be possessed by those on either the right or the left-hand paths. Anyway, we are warned that these powers are not to be developed promiscuously, but developed naturally as a result of our spiritual efforts. But in the context of the superheroes I've just mentioned, it'll be interesting to list them as they are in Hindu philosophy. So here they are. The first one is anima, reducing one's body even to the size of an atom. And there's actually a superhero called the Atom who does just that, or reduces it to a very small size. There's Mahima, expanding one's body to an infinitely large size. Garima, becoming infinitely heavy. Lagima, becoming almost weightless. Prapti, having unrestricted access to all places. Prakamya, realizing whatever one desires. Ishtava, possessing absolute lordship. And Vashtava, the power to subjugate all. Probably these take place, some of them on another plane of being. But it's interesting to note that these are powers that we develop, but hopefully one should not covet such powers. They come naturally as one progresses spiritually. If one covets such powers, one's falling into egotism. And some people do, some people just are more interested in the phenomena and want to develop powers. So those are the 8 siddhis, Ashta Siddhi, or the 8 perfections, Mahasiddhi. as they are known. But what illumines our studies and meditations is this belief that good will triumph in the end, and the realization of our immortality. This is what makes us truly human. I'm just obscuring that, but I'll read it out. Anne Frank says, in spite of everything, I still believe that people are really good at heart. I simply can't build up my hopes on a foundation consisting of confusion, misery, and death. And Anne Frank said that despite everything she believed that people were really good at heart. I often wonder whether she would have thought the same had she survived the concentration camp, but I would hope that she would have. She'd always be one of my favourite people, Anne Frank. She died so young. She'd had such an incredible impact upon society. Her diaries, and I know that millions of people did die besides her, but she became a symbol of them all with her, with her diary. I think that most people probably are good at heart. There may be a few who are not, but most people are, I think. I mean, sadly, I said not everybody. Even some we regard as evil, terrorists even, are motivated by desire for justice. I may feel that what they are doing is for the ultimate good of the world, or to redress some wrong done to their people. Of course, their methods and attitude are wrong, because violence just breeds more violence. And both Jesus and the Buddha told us to love our enemies and to make peace with them. But a lot of the motivations of these people are not fired by evil. The results may be evil, but in their minds, the ideals behind it are noble to them. There's very few people who do things just out of evil and just to be evil. There are some, but very, very few. But for the hero fired by the light of the Spirit, they see clearly what the world needs for its general good, its greater good. They know that all must awaken to that one spirit that shines in the hearts of all beings, regardless of race, religion, sex, caste, or colour. It is that the bond that unites us all. Many great heroes have come to earth to show us this, to point the way, though none would call themselves heroes. There are great luminaries like Jesus, Buddha, and Krishna, and many, many others throughout the ages on all levels of being. All the great philosophers like Plato, Pythagoras, and countless others, H.P. Blavatsky, and right down to our plane with the emergency services, doctors and nurses, the ordinary folk who do acts of heroism the world over, in war zones or third world countries, and all those who do acts of heroism in daily life. The mother who lifts the overturned car of her trapped child, finding superhuman strength from somewhere. Those who rush into burning houses to save people, or dive into the water to save those drowning. Those who protect animals from cruelty. The list is endless. But these few examples show how heroism, on all these different levels, is so prevalent in society, although usually we just get negative news. So to recap a little, though we have such diverse lives, the spirit in each one of us is identical, and each one of us has the same potential. The real task of it is not just to gather information, but to learn how to befriend our higher self and make it a real power for good in the world. Now, most of us here are not at that stage yet, but the important thing is correct motivation. If we study true Theosophy or a genuine spiritual tradition, we are given all that we need to understand what that motivation is. The essence of Theosophical teaching is the oneness of all things. We go through life imagining that we are separate. Everything negative springs from that very fact. We see individuals as separate. We see families, towns and cities, countries, when we all share that same shining spirit. So the first thing is to get that motivation. That is the first and most important, theosophically and spiritually. Esoteric philosophy teaches that the sun we see in the sky is not the real sun. It is a maya, an illusion, like all else in the manifested universe. The heat we feel is not from the sun itself, but as a result of the interaction of its rays with our atmosphere. We are living simultaneously on 7 planes of being, and each of these planes has its equivalent sun, which are the principles of the sun we see in the sky. So we are illumined on all levels. When we talk about enlightenment or illumination, it has to do with the lighting up of our being, because this light is within us. The sun shines in and on us all equally. We create the clouds that hide it. Ultimately, we are invincible beings, no matter what happens to our personal self. The real part of us is untouchable. I mentioned, Joseph Campbell wrote a book called The Hero with a Thousand Faces, The Hero with a Thousand Faces. And he writes, a hero ventures forth from the world of common day into a region of supernatural wonder. Fabulous forces are there encountered, and a decisive victory is won. The hero comes back from this mysterious adventure with the power to bestow boons on his fellow man. He comes back with the power to bestow boons on his fellow man. That's much like the Bodhisattva, who, having reached the threshold of enlightenment, remains behind to help others. He returns to the world to help in one sense. This, of course, is the greatest heroism, though no Bodhisattva would call themselves heroes, or even Bodhisattvas for that matter. But they do go through many lives of experience, good and bad, all helping them to achieve their goal. And in those lives, there are many battles to win, and many are lost on the way. But they keep going until victory is theirs. It's the story of every man and every woman. Every man and every woman. So we need very much to begin to realize what we truly are when we clear away all the foreign influences that are placed on us by the society that we live in. We are molded into what the media and education system wants us to be. Strip all this away and we become what we are in reality. All the clouds are gone and the sun shines fully in us. The dream and the illusion has passed and we are awake at last. To do this is the path of the true hero. Now here is a Sufi tale that we can all learn from. On his way to the bazaar, Ahmed's donkey fell into an abandoned well. Ahmed sat by the edge of the well and listened to his donkey as it cried piteously. Listening to the sound of the donkey's cry, Ahmed reasoned that the donkey must have broken its legs, and since the donkey was old, he thought he should put the donkey out of its misery. He went back to the village and called a few of the villagers to help him. Ahmed asked every man to grab a shovel and begin to shovel dirt into the well. Not realizing what was happening, the donkey at first cried and wailed horribly. Then a few shovelfuls later, the donkey quieted down completely. The peasants peered down into the well and were astounded by what they saw. With every shovelful of dirt that landed on its back, the donkey was doing something amazing. He was shaking the dirt off and taking a step up on a new layer of dirt. As the peasants continued to shovel dirt on top of the animal, he would shake it off and take a step up. Soon the donkey stepped up over the edge of the well and trotted off, to the shock and astonishment of all the peasants. Then Ahmed grinned and said, we all have to learn from my wise donkey. When life throws a shovel of dirt at you, all kinds of dirt, the trick to getting out of such circumstances is not to let the dirt bury you. Shake it off and take a step up. Each of our troubles is a stepping stone. Like the donkey, we get out of the deepest well by not stopping and never giving up. And H.P. Blavatsky says, the path that leadeth on is lighted by one fire, the light of daring burning in the heart. The more one dares, the more he shall obtain. path that leadeth on is lighted by one fire, the light of daring burning in the heart. The more one dares, the more he or she shall obtain. As the Zen saying goes, 7 times down, 8 times up. Fall down 7 times, stand up 8. As I've said, the hero is the spiritual part of us that needs to be given the chance to express itself despite what life throws at us. To live in the world but be not of it is a seemingly difficult thing, but easier perhaps than we imagine, as we are constantly finding excuses. But that is the real person, the true man or the true woman of Buddhism, the real human being of Confucianism, Taoism, and the hero in us all. And a hero is someone who has given his or her life to something bigger than oneself, as Joseph Campbell says. And the hero is one who kindles a great light in the world, who sets up blazing torches in the dark streets of life for men to see by. But Felix Adler. The hero is one who kindles a great light in the world, who sets up blazing torches in the dark streets of life for men to see by. That's one of my favourites. It's a beautiful saying. And King Arthur was one of my heroes. I played with a trash can lid for a knightly shield and my uncle's cane for the sword Excalibur. Another version of me with the towel tucked in my collar for a cape. Another. See how people do tend to do that. That's how people start off when they're younger. A hero is an ordinary individual who finds the strength to persevere and endure in spite of overwhelming obstacles. And that's said by Christopher Reeve, who many may know had an accident while filming. He fell off a horse and consequently was paralysed. And he must have had great experience of this perseverance and endurance. Sadly, he died a few years later. Perseverance, as it says in the voice of the silence, have perseverance as one who doth evermore endure. Perseverance and endure. Have perseverance as one who doth forevermore endure. And you are the hero of your own story. That is me. You are the hero of your own story. You are the hero of your own story, yeah. The never-ending story. We are the hero of our own stories. Each we have our own stories. I remember one episode of Supergirl when she stood on a balcony looking across. It was nighttime. She was looking across the city with all the lights of the city lit up, and she said something like, "Behind every window, a different story." And I thought that was really beautiful. Behind every window, a different story. Some sad, some happy, some neither. Some tragic, some beautiful. We're all the heroes of our own story. As I mentioned, the never-ending story. We are all part of the never-ending story. In the never-ending story, a nothingness or nothing is engulfing the world because people have lost their imagination, as is happening in the world now at the moment. People are becoming more and more materialistic, more and more shutting out the light of their imagination, the pure spirit, the divinity within. And then this, on the left, is the hand of the princess. And Fantasia, where never-ending story is set, has almost disappeared. All that's left is this one little light, this seed light, which she gives to Bastian. Now, Bastian is a boy who's been reading the story in an attic in the school from a book he got from a bookshop. It's a magical book. It takes him into this world where there's a hero called Artreo, and he's a hero of the story. But right at the end, when everything's nearly gone, she gives him this seed and tells him that he can start up this world again, which he does. He starts up Fantasia again, by using his imagination, this seed. So we all have this seed within us, this divinity, this light within us, and we can nurture that within us. We can create a beautiful world. We can. Even though the world seems to be dying out in many ways, with violence and cruelty, we all have this seed within us. We can all find the hero within us to start this beautiful new world. And there you are. There it is. It's time to end the show. I didn't want this page to come on, really. That's the way to do it. A bit of a clumsy ending there, but there you are. I'm new to all these things. Despite that, I hope you enjoyed the talk, and we can all find a hero in us and create a beautiful world like the one behind me. Hopefully, there's someone holding up a sword, the sword of divinity, hopefully. So, until we meet again, Om Shanti, 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 peace, 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 peace on earth and goodwill to all beings. Thank you very much.